"Be quiet, you're freezing. Tonight you'll sleep between us," said the two Apache women. The cold did not arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, minute by minute, like something alive that had chosen him as its target. At first, he thought he could manage. He had faced cold nights before. He told himself this was just another delay, just another inconvenience. But deep down, something felt different about this night. The road was empty in every direction. No headlights, no houses. No sound except the wind brushing across the dry land. His truck had stopped without warning, the engine giving a weak cough before going silent. He tried again and again, but the key only clicked uselessly. The fuel gauge was fine. The battery had power. Still, nothing happened. He stepped out of the vehicle to check under the hood. The wind hit him hard, cutting through his jacket as if it were paper. The sky was clear, filled with sharp stars, but there was no comfort in their beauty. The temperature was dropping fast. He could feel it in his fingers first. They became stiff, slower to move. He slammed the hood shut and looked around. His phone had no signal. The screen glowed for a moment, then dimmed as the battery warning appeared. He laughed quietly to himself, not because it was funny, but because fear sometimes comes out that way. He was miles away from the nearest town. He had taken this road to save time. Now time was turning against him. At first, he paced to keep warm. He walked up and down the road, counting his steps, breathing into his hands. The ground was cold beneath his boots, and each breath burned his lungs. He told himself that someone would come. A ranch truck, a patrol vehicle, anyone, but the road stayed empty. As the hours passed, his confidence began to fade. His movements slowed. His thoughts became heavy. He tried to sit inside the truck for shelter, but the cold metal seemed to pull warmth from his body. He wrapped himself in what little he had, but it was not enough. His teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. He remembered stories he had heard growing up about people who underestimated the cold, people who thought they were fine until they were. He forced himself to stay awake, to stay alert. Sleep felt tempting, like a soft voice telling him to rest. He knew that was dangerous. He stepped out of the truck again, hoping movement would help. The wind had grown stronger. It pushed against him, unkind and relentless. His hands were numb now. He could barely feel his face. Panic began to rise, slow and heavy in his chest. He shouted once, then again, his voice echoing weakly into the darkness. No answer came back. The land swallowed the sound as if he had never spoken at all. He thought about his family. Small moments came into his mind without warning. A laugh at the dinner table, a warm cup of coffee on a normal morning, things he had never paid much attention to before. Now they felt precious. He wondered if he had made a mistake by taking this road. He wondered if anyone would find him before morning. The cold was no longer just outside him. It was inside now. His arms felt heavy. His legs didn't want to move. He sat down on the edge of the truck seat and closed his eyes for just a moment, telling himself it was only to think, only to breathe. That was when he noticed a light in the distance. At first, he thought it was his imagination. His vision had been playing tricks on him. He blinked hard and stood up, steadying himself against the truck. The light was still there, faint but real. It moved slowly, growing brighter. Hope rushed through him so fast it made him dizzy. He stepped into the road, waving his arms, though he wasn't sure they were moving much at all. His voice came out rough and weak when he tried to call out. The vehicle slowed as it approached. He could see now that it wasn't a large truck. It was a smaller car. It pulled over carefully, stopping several feet away. The engine stayed running. Two women stepped out. They didn't rush toward him. They watched him closely, taking in his condition. Their faces were calm but serious. They were wrapped in thick coats, scarves pulled high, eyes sharp and aware. One of them spoke first, her voice steady. She asked if he was alone, if he was hurt. He tried to answer clearly, but his words came out slow, clumsy. His tongue felt thick in his mouth. They exchanged a glance that needed no words. They both understood the situation immediately. This was not just a breakdown. This was dangerous. One of them moved closer and took his arm gently but firmly. Her grip was strong, grounding. She told him to sit down in their car. He tried to say he didn't want to be trouble. The words barely made sense as they left his mouth. She shook her head once. There was no anger in it, just certainty. Inside the car, the heat hit him all at once. His body reacted violently. His hands shook. His breathing became uneven. The women adjusted the heater and wrapped him in extra clothing they had with them. They spoke quietly, telling him to breathe slowly. He realized then how close he had come to something he didn't want to think about. The fear finally caught up to him, but it came mixed with relief so strong it made his eyes burn. They told him they lived nearby, that leaving him alone was not an option. One of them said the night was only getting colder. He nodded, unable to argue even if he wanted to. As the car moved again, the road passing beneath them, he leaned back and stared at the ceiling. His thoughts drifted in and out. He felt embarrassed, grateful, exhausted all at once. The women spoke softly to each other, occasionally asking him simple questions to keep him awake. His name, where he was headed, how long he'd been out there. Each answer took effort. When they turned off the main road, he noticed how dark everything became. No streetlights. Just the narrow beam of headlights cutting through the night. He trusted them anyway. Something in their calm presence made it easy. By the time they reached their home, his strength was nearly gone. They helped him inside, guiding him carefully, making sure he didn't fall. Warm air wrapped around him as the door closed behind them. He did not know yet how much this night would stay with him. All he knew was that he was alive, and that strangers had chosen to stop, to care, when they could have driven past. Outside, the cold continued its silent march across the land. Inside, the danger had paused for now. The warmth of the house felt unreal at first, like stepping into another world. The cold that had wrapped itself around him for hours did not leave easily. It clung to his bones, making his body shake even as the air around him grew warmer. His legs felt weak, and his thoughts came slowly, as if his mind was still stuck out on the dark road. The two women guided him inside with quiet care. They did not rush him, but they did not allow him to stand still either. One of them closed the door firmly, keeping the cold night outside where it belonged. The other moved ahead, switching on a soft light that filled the room with a gentle glow. The house was simple and clean. There were no fancy things, but everything had its place. Woven blankets were folded neatly on a chair. The smell of wood and warm food lingered in the air. It felt lived in, safe, and calm. That calmness slowly began to reach him. They helped him sit down on a sturdy chair near a small heater. One woman knelt in front of him and checked his hands, rubbing them carefully to bring back feeling. Her touch was firm and respectful, focused only on helping him warm up. She asked him again if he was hurt. He shook his head, though even that small movement made him dizzy. The other woman disappeared into another room and returned with a mug. Steam rose from it, carrying a comforting smell. She placed it in his hands and wrapped his fingers around it so he would not drop it. She told him to sip slowly. He obeyed, feeling the warmth travel from his lips down into his chest. As the heat worked its way through him, his shaking began to ease. His breathing steadied. His thoughts became clearer. He looked around the room, taking in small details he had missed before. A family photograph on the wall, a pair of worn boots by the door, a blanket folded with care, not for display but for use. The women spoke little at first. They moved around the room with quiet purpose, preparing food, adjusting the heater, checking on him without making him feel like a burden. Their actions showed experience. They had done this before, maybe not in the same way, but they knew how to take care of someone in trouble. After a while, one of them sat across from him and asked where he was coming from. He told her, his voice still weak but steady enough now. He explained about the broken truck, about thinking he could handle the night. She listened without judgment, nodding slowly. She told him that the land could be unforgiving, especially at night, that many people made the same mistake. Her tone was not sharp. It was matter of fact, as if she were sharing a lesson learned long ago. They brought him a plate of warm food. Nothing heavy, just enough to give him strength. He ate slowly, each bite helping him feel more human again. With every swallow, the fear that had sat in his chest began to loosen its grip. As he ate, the women spoke more. They talked about the weather, about how the cold had come earlier than expected this year. One of them mentioned a neighbor who had lost livestock to the sudden drop in temperature. Their conversation was calm, steady, grounding. It pulled him further away from the panic of the night. He realized then how tired he was, not just in his body but deep inside. The kind of tiredness that comes after fear has passed. His eyelids felt heavy. His head nodded forward once before he caught himself. One of the women noticed immediately. She stood up and told him he needed to rest, but not yet, not until his body was fully warm. She brought another blanket and placed it over his shoulders. The fabric was thick and worn, the kind that held heat well. They asked him about his family, if anyone would be looking for him. He answered honestly. He told them who might worry. One of the women nodded and said they would help him make a call in the morning when his phone and the signal were better. The thought of morning felt distant, almost unreal. Time inside the house moved differently. The outside world, with its dark road and freezing wind, felt far away now, like a bad memory. The heater hummed softly. The light flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the wind continued to move across the land, but its sound was dull here, muted by walls and warmth. After some time, they helped him stand again. His legs were still unsteady, but stronger than before. They guided him to another room where a bed was prepared. Clean sheets, more blankets, everything arranged quickly but carefully. He hesitated, not wanting to impose further. He tried to say he would be fine on the chair. One of the women shook her head gently. She told him his body needed rest. That this was not something to argue about. He gave in, too tired to insist. They helped him sit on the bed and adjust the blankets around him. As soon as he lay back, his body sank into the mattress. The softness surprised him. He hadn't realized how tense he had been until that moment. Before leaving the room, one of the women reminded him to call out if he felt cold or unwell. Her voice was calm, steady, full of quiet authority. He nodded, already half asleep. The door was left slightly open. Light from the other room spilled in, warm and reassuring. He listened to the low sounds of the house, the movement of footsteps, the clink of a dish, the murmur of voices. As sleep began to pull him under, he thought about how easily the night could have ended differently. How a simple choice, a stopped car, a warm house had changed everything. Outside, the cold still ruled the land. But inside, surrounded by strangers who had become protectors, he finally allowed his body to rest, knowing that for this night at least he was safe. The night grew quieter as the hours passed, but the cold outside did not give up. It pressed against the walls of the house, testing every crack and corner. Inside, the heater worked hard, humming steadily, but it was clear it could only do so much. The house was old, built for strength and simplicity, not modern comfort. He woke slowly, not fully aware of where he was at first. His body felt heavy, wrapped in layers of warmth, yet there was a deep chill that still lingered in his bones. He tried to move his fingers and was relieved when they responded. The shaking had stopped, but weakness remained. From the other room, he heard low voices. The two women were speaking softly, careful not to disturb him. Their tone was serious, thoughtful. He could not hear every word, but he understood enough to know they were talking about the cold, about the night getting worse. He pushed himself up slightly, listening. A gust of wind rattled the windows, stronger than before. The heater clicked, paused, then started again. The sound made one thing clear. The warmth inside could fade if the cold won. One of the women stepped into the doorway and noticed he was awake. She walked in quietly and asked how he was feeling. He told her the truth, that he felt better but still very cold. She nodded as if she had expected that answer. She checked his forehead and hands, then stood there for a moment thinking. Her face showed no panic, only calm focus. She told him the temperature was dropping fast and that the heater alone might not be enough through the deepest part of the night. The other woman joined them, carrying another blanket. She placed it over him, tucking it in carefully. Still, the chill did not fully leave. His body was warm on the outside now, but inside the cold lingered stubbornly. The women exchanged another look. This time it lasted longer. There was a silent understanding between them, shaped by experience and trust. They had grown up learning how to handle harsh conditions, how to protect life when nature became unforgiving. One of them spoke clearly and firmly, not asking, not hesitating. She told him he needed more warmth than blankets could give. Her words were simple, practical, and focused on one thing only, keeping him safe through the night. He tried to protest, saying he did not want to cause trouble. The words came out slowly, weakly. Even as he spoke, he knew his resistance meant little. His body was not strong enough to argue. She stopped him with a raised hand and shook her head once. There was no room for debate. She told him to be quiet, that wasting energy would only make things worse. Then she said the words that would stay with him forever, that tonight he would sleep between them so the warmth could be shared. There was nothing strange or dramatic in her tone, no hesitation, just certainty. It was the voice of someone who understood survival and took responsibility seriously. He felt a mix of emotions rush through him, embarrassment, gratitude, confusion, but fear did not return. Something about their calm made him feel safe. He realized that to them this was not personal, it was necessary. They moved the blankets, rearranging the bed to make space. Everything was done with care and respect. No rush, no awkwardness, just quiet efficiency. They told him to move slowly. One woman supported his back while the other adjusted the blankets beneath him. When he was settled, they lay down on either side, keeping a respectful distance while ensuring shared warmth. Almost immediately, he felt the difference. The deep cold inside him began to loosen. His breathing slowed. His muscles relaxed for the first time since the truck had stopped hours ago. The room was dimly lit by a small lamp. Shadows moved softly along the walls as the wind outside continued its restless work. Inside, the air felt warmer now, steadier. They spoke quietly, mostly to keep him awake a little longer. One of them told him to focus on his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and steady. He followed her instructions, grateful for the guidance. As time passed, they began to talk about small things, where he was from, what kind of work he did. Nothing heavy, nothing that demanded effort, just enough to keep his mind engaged. He listened more than he spoke. Their voices were low and calm, carrying stories of daily life, of the land, of seasons that came and went without mercy. They spoke of cold winters before, of storms that taught respect for nature. At one point, the wind howled so loudly that the house creaked. He felt a flicker of fear, but it passed quickly. The steady presence on either side of him reminded him that he was not alone anymore. The heater clicked again, struggling but holding. One of the women reached out and adjusted the blanket, making sure no cold air slipped in. The movement was gentle, careful not to startle him. Gradually, his thoughts began to blur. The exhaustion he had been fighting all night finally started to win. His eyelids grew heavy. His breathing deepened. Before sleep fully claimed him, he felt a sense of deep humility. These women had opened their home, their space, without hesitation, without expectation. They had seen a stranger in danger and acted without question. The night stretched on, but inside that room, time seemed to slow. The cold outside could no longer reach him. Wrapped in shared warmth and quiet strength, he drifted into a deep, healing sleep. The danger had not fully passed yet, but for the first time since the truck had stopped, His body was no longer fighting to survive. It was resting, trusting, and slowly recovering, carried through the worst of the night by human kindness and quiet courage. The night slowly began to change, though no one noticed it at first. The darkness outside remained thick, and the cold still ruled the land, but something gentle was happening inside the house. The deepest danger had passed, and now the long wait toward morning had begun. He slept deeply for a while, the kind of sleep that comes only after fear has drained a body of all its strength. His breathing was slow and steady. The tightness in his chest eased. The sharp ache in his hands and feet softened into a dull memory. For the first time since the truck had stopped, his body was no longer fighting the cold. The women did not sleep much. They rested lightly, always aware of his condition and the sounds of the house. Years of living close to the land had taught them that safety was never something to assume. They listened to the wind, to the heater, to his breathing, making sure nothing changed for the worse. At some point, he stirred. His eyes opened slightly, unfocused. The room felt warmer now, calmer. The lamp still cast a soft glow, and the shadows on the wall had shifted. He realized he was no longer shaking. One of the women noticed his movement right away. She asked quietly if he was awake. He nodded and whispered that he felt better. His voice was still weak but clearer than before. She told him that was good, but not to move too much yet. The cold had taken a lot from him and his body needed time. Her voice was steady, comforting in its confidence. He lay still, listening. Outside, the wind had softened. It was still cold, but not as fierce. The house no longer creaked under heavy gusts. That change alone brought him a sense of relief he hadn't realized he needed. As the hours passed, the women began to speak more, still quietly, but with less tension in their voices. They talked about the coming day, about checking the roads, about whether the temperature would rise enough for travel. Their words were practical, focused, grounded in reality. He listened and felt something settle inside him. He was no longer just surviving the night. He was moving forward, step by step, toward safety. Eventually, the women sat up carefully, adjusting the blankets but staying close enough to keep warmth steady. They asked him how his hands felt now. He flexed his fingers slowly and told them the numbness was almost gone. That news brought small nods of satisfaction. One of them said that was a good sign. It meant his body was recovering. She reminded him that he was lucky they had found him when they did. Her tone was calm, not dramatic, but the truth of her words was heavy. He swallowed and nodded. He knew how close he had come to something far worse. He did not need it explained. When the sky outside began to lighten just a little, the women helped him sit up. The movement made him dizzy at first, but they waited patiently until it passed. They guided him slowly, never rushing, never letting him feel alone. They moved back to the main room, where the heater still hummed and the air smelled faintly of wood and warmth. One of the women prepared a simple breakfast. The sound of a pan and the smell of food made his stomach tighten with hunger he hadn't felt all night. They sat him at the table and placed a warm meal in front of him. He ate slowly, carefully, as they watched to make sure he was steady. Each bite brought more strength. His hands no longer trembled. His thoughts felt clearer. As he ate, they talked openly now. They asked more about where he was going, why he had taken that road. He explained, embarrassed, that he thought it would save time. One of the women gave a small smile, not unkind but knowing. She said many people made that choice. The land had a way of reminding them who was in control. He asked about them, about how long they had lived there. They shared pieces of their lives without hesitation. Stories of family, of growing up learning to respect the weather, of nights when helping others was simply the right thing to do. There was no pride in their voices, no need for praise. Helping him had not been a heroic act to them. It was a responsibility. As the morning light grew stronger, the world outside became clearer through the window. Frost covered the ground, shining softly. The road he had nearly lost his life on looked peaceful now, almost harmless. One of the women went outside to check the temperature and the road conditions. When she returned, she said it was still cold but manageable. With help, his truck could be dealt with later. They helped him stand again. This time, his legs held him better. He felt weak but stable. Each step reminded him that he was still here, still moving, still alive. Before making any plans, they insisted he rest a little more. They did not rush him out. Safety mattered more than schedules. He sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the light spread across the land. In that quiet moment, something inside him shifted. He understood that this night would stay with him forever, not because of the fear, but because of the kindness. Because two people had seen a stranger in danger and chosen to act without question. The cold had tested him. The night had nearly taken him, but human care had brought him back. As the day fully arrived, he knew that when he finally left this house, he would carry more than gratitude with him. He would carry a lesson about respect, humility, and the quiet strength found in doing what is right, especially when no one is watching. Morning arrived slowly, as if the land itself was careful not to rush. The sky changed from deep gray to pale blue, and thin sunlight stretched across the frozen ground. The cold was still there, but it no longer felt cruel. It felt calm, like a challenge that had already been faced and survived. He sat near the window, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the light grow stronger. His body felt tired but steady. The sharp weakness from the night before had faded into a manageable soreness. Every breath felt easier now. Every movement reminded him that he had been given another chance. The two women moved through the house with quiet purpose. They cleaned up the breakfast dishes, checked the heater, and prepared for the day ahead. There was no sense of hurry. They worked with the calm confidence of people who understood the rhythm of the land and respected it. After some time, one of them told him they would go check on his truck. The road conditions were better now, and daylight made everything safer. He offered to come with them, but they told him to stay inside and keep warm. His body still needed care, and they were not willing to take risks. They left for a short while, and the house grew quiet. He sat alone with his thoughts for the first time since the breakdown. The silence felt different now. It was not heavy or frightening. It was peaceful. He thought about the night again, about the moment his truck had stopped, about the fear that followed. He remembered the sound of the wind, the numbness in his hands, the hopelessness that had crept into his mind. It felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. When the women returned, they brought good news. The truck was still there, just as he had left it. It would need help to start, but it could be handled. There was no rush. Everything could be done safely now. They helped him get dressed in his own clothes, which were dry and warm. Before he put on his jacket, one of the women handed him a scarf. She told him to keep it. The cold mornings would last a while longer. He tried to refuse, but she insisted with a small smile. Once he was ready, they sat together at the table one last time. They talked about the road ahead, about taking safer routes, about paying closer attention to weather warnings. The advice was practical, offered without judgment. He listened carefully. He knew these lessons had been earned through experience, not books or signs. He promised himself he would remember them. When it was time to leave, they walked him to the door. The sunlight outside was bright now, reflecting off the frost. The air was cold but fresh, no longer threatening. He turned to thank them, but the words felt too small for what he wanted to say. He told them that they had saved his life. One of the women nodded once, simply. The other told him to travel safely and to respect the land. There were no long goodbyes, no dramatic gestures. Just quiet understanding. As he stepped outside, he paused and looked back at the house. It stood firm against the open land, simple and strong. For one night, it had been a place of safety when he had nothing else. With their help, he reached his truck later that morning and arranged for assistance. The engine eventually came back to life. As he drove away, the road looked different to him. It no longer felt like a shortcut or an empty stretch of land. It felt alive, deserving of respect. The days that followed returned to normal, but something inside him had changed. He found himself thinking about that night often, about how close he had come to losing everything, about how easily help could have passed him by. He became more careful, more patient. He planned his trips better. He paid attention to warnings. He stopped to help others when he could, even when it was inconvenient. Sometimes, late at night, he would remember the quiet voices in the dark, the shared warmth, the calm strength that had carried him through the worst hours. Those memories stayed with him, steady and grounding. Years later, the details of the night faded, the exact temperature, the sound of the wind, the shape of the road. But the lesson never left him. He had learned that survival is not always about strength or skill. Sometimes it is about people. About kindness offered without conditions. About doing the right thing simply because it is right. That night did not make headlines. It was never written down or recorded anywhere official, but it mattered. It mattered because a life continued. It mattered because compassion proved stronger than cold. And it mattered because two women, guided by quiet courage and deep respect for life, reminded one man, and would forever remind him, that even in the harshest conditions, humanity can still shine.